1,000 years ago, the Bay of Bengal operated as a massive, unified economic engine. At the center of it all was the Chola Empire, expanding rapidly under the leadership of Rajaraja and Rajendra Chola. Their economy was supercharged by powerful private enterprise, driven by elite merchant guilds like the Ayavale 500. These guilds consolidated massive volumes of gold, textiles, and spices, aggressively targeting the wealthy markets in Song Dynasty China. Producing this much high-value cargo created intense economic pressure. They had to export eastward to maintain their wealth, meaning any obstruction on the route to China would become a direct threat to the empire's bottom line. Getting those merchant fleets to China meant they had to funnel through one specific, unavoidable stretch of water. This satellite view shows the Strait of Malacca. It's a narrow waterway separating the Malay Peninsula and Sumatra, acting as a natural trap. The Srivijaya Empire controlled the massive landmasses flanking this strait, giving them total territorial dominance over the water route. They used this position to levy heavy, extortionate tolls on every single Chola ship that passed through, eating away at the merchants' profit margins. The strait acted as an intentional choke point, strangling the Chola Empire's most lucrative trade route. The Cholas realized they couldn't negotiate their way past a monopoly. They decided to break it open by force. Rajendra Chola engineered a deep-water fleet. These ships were built specifically to survive the rough, open ocean, rather than hugging the safety of a coastline. They were designed strictly for heavy military transport, replacing standard merchant cargo with immense tactical weight. The Cholas loaded these vessels with legions of master archers and massive live war elephants. Loading heavy, specialized cargo and live animals onto deep-water ships turned the Chola Navy into a mobile, transoceanic invasion engine. In the 11th century, typical naval routes were a slow coastal crawl. Srivijayan defenders knew exactly where to track ships. But in 1025 CE, Rajendra Chola abandoned the coast entirely, sailing directly across 3,000 kilometers of open water. By crossing the deep ocean, the Chola ships bypassed all early warning systems and blindsided the coastal defenders. The massive, heavy warships slammed directly into Srivijaya's maritime blockades, splintering the defensive barriers with sheer physical force. The defensive lines collapsed entirely, and the Chola forces captured the Srivijayan king. This direct strike neutralized Srivijaya's control over the strait, solving an international supply chain crisis through pure naval engineering and audacity. With the bottleneck removed, the route to China was completely open. Free trade flowed eastward, and the massive Bay of Bengal became undisputed Chola territory. Along with textiles and spices, the merchant ships exported Indian culture straight into Southeast Asia. This is a Chola bronze of the Shiva Nataraja. Its presence across maritime trade routes illustrates how Chola aesthetic and religious symbols traveled alongside their merchant fleets. Back home, Rajendra Chola laid down intricate brick temple foundations, building physical monuments to memorialize the campaign. By dismantling Srivijaya's monopoly, the Chola Navy secured a trade corridor that kept Indian goods and cultural influence flowing toward China for the remainder of their dynasty's reign.
Let's jump right into this explainer because we are looking at something absolutely mind-blowing today. When you think of ancient maritime heavyweights, the Romans, the Greeks, maybe the Vikings usually come to mind. But today, we're unpacking the jaw-dropping scale of a 1,000-year-old South Indian empire that completely rewrote the rules of naval warfare and global trade. We're talking about the Chola Empire. And specifically, we're looking at their creation of a true blue water navy. Now, by blue water, I mean they weren't just building little ships to safely hug the coastline. No way. They mastered the deep, terrifying, unpredictable open ocean. So through the historical records we're diving into today, we're going to see exactly how this ancient powerhouse pulled off what is arguably history's greatest transoceanic strike. Turned the entire Bay of Bengal into their personal lake. Just think about the sheer swagger behind that statement for a second. The Bay of Bengal is massive, right? It's over 2 million square kilometers of wild, monsoon-swept ocean. But for the Chola Empire, it wasn't a terrifying barrier at all. It was basically their own private swimming pool. Imagine having a navy so incredibly powerful, so technologically advanced for the 11th century, that you could just claim an entire ocean as your own personal territory. This wasn't some loose collection of local merchant ships or fishing boats. This was a highly coordinated military and economic machine that didn't just sail the seas, they utterly dominated them, and they dictated the terms of global trade across half the known world.
Section 1. The Chola Maritime Monopoly.
This kind of unprecedented maritime dominance definitely didn't happen by accident. It was the deliberate, brilliant vision of two specific rulers, Rajaraja Chola and his son Rajendra Chola. Under their leadership, the empire didn't just want a slice of the ocean trade pie, they wanted the whole bakery. They wanted a total monopoly. And to get it, they built an absolute war machine. When we look at the cargo these fleets were carrying, it literally breaks the brain. We aren't just talking about a few crates of spices or some nice textiles here. We are talking about literal, fully grown war elephants being transported across the open ocean. Can you even imagine the mind-boggling logistical genius required to engineer massive wooden vessels capable of housing, feeding, and stabilizing multi-ton war elephants on rolling ocean waves? Unbelievable. Alongside these behemoths, you had elite master archers, mountains of gold coins, highly sought-after textiles, and exotic spices. This fleet was a dual-purpose masterpiece. It was simultaneously a floating treasury and a terrifying military asset, perfectly designed to project undeniable economic power and overwhelming force.
So, where was this massive floating fortress actually going? The ultimate destination was Song Dynasty China. At this point in history, Song Dynasty China was an absolute economic juggernaut. It had a booming population, massive cities, and a completely insatiable appetite for exotic luxury goods, spices, and raw materials. The Chola Empire recognized this unparalleled economic opportunity. This wasn't just about exploration. This was about establishing a direct, uninterrupted pipeline pumping their gold, textiles, and spices straight into one of the wealthiest and most lucrative regions on the planet. Because whoever controlled the trade route to China effectively controlled the global economy of the time. But to mount an operation of this incredible magnitude, building the ships, outfitting the armies, sourcing the goods, you need some seriously unimaginable financial backing.
Section 2. Elite Merchant Guilds. The emperors obviously had the grand vision and the military might, but the financial engines making these massive fleets a reality actually came from the private sector. If you want to understand how a 1,000-year-old empire funded a blue water navy, you have to look at the Eye of 500. Think of the Eye of 500 like an ancient, highly organized corporate conglomerate. They were almost like a proto-East India Company, centuries before the East India Company even existed. They were an elite merchant guild that heavily backed these Chola expeditions because they had the deep pockets, the organizational logistics, and the vast networks required to actually manage international trade at that scale. They worked hand in hand with the state to supercharge this maritime monopoly, making sure that whenever the Chola navy set sail, it was incredibly profitable. They were essentially the private economic fuel to the empire's military fire. Section 3. The Malacca Strait Choke Point.
Okay, so in any great historical operation, there's always a major roadblock. To get those massive fleets from the Bay of Bengal over to the wealthy markets of China, you have to pass through a very specific, narrow geographical funnel known as the Malacca Strait. You simply can't avoid it. And unfortunately for the Chola Empire, someone else was already sitting right there holding the keys. That someone was the Srivijaya Empire, a mighty naval power based in modern-day Indonesia and Malaysia. They completely controlled the Malacca Strait, and they recognized exactly what kind of leverage they had. They were using this geography as a massive choke point, demanding hefty, extortionate tolls on every single ship trying to pass through. For the booming, highly lucrative Chola trade network, this extortion was a huge problem. These Srivijayan tolls were eating directly into the profits of the Ayavoli 500 and actively challenging the Chola monopoly.
Section 4. The 1025 CE Naval Strike.
Faced with this aggressive extortion from a rival superpower, Emperor Rajendra Chola did not negotiate. He didn't offer a treaty, and he absolutely did not pay the tolls. Instead, he launched an unprecedented military response. He sent his fleet across 3,000 kilometers. Just let that number really sink in for a second. 3,000 kilometers of treacherous, unpredictable open ocean. Back in 1025 CE, traditional navies strictly relied on hugging the coastline for safety. To sail straight across deep water meant you had to battle unpredictable monsoon winds, navigate entirely by the stars, and survive in an environment where a single sudden storm could wipe out your entire armada. To launch a transoceanic strike across 3,000 kilometers of deep blue water wasn't just brave, it was a stunning, terrifying display of naval engineering, navigational mastery, and sheer audacity. The Srivijaya Empire literally never saw it coming because an attack from straight across the ocean was considered technologically impossible.
The execution of this campaign was a masterclass in swift, brutal efficiency. It was basically an ancient blitzkrieg. Because they crossed the deep ocean, the Chola fleet arrived entirely out of the blue, catching the Srivijaya Empire completely off guard. First, they utterly smashed the Srivijayan defenses. Those heavily engineered ships carrying master archers and literal war elephants did exactly what they were designed to do, overwhelming the coastal cities in rapid succession. Second, they didn't just win a minor skirmish or sink a few boats. They decisively captured the Srivijayan king himself, decapitating the empire's leadership in one fell swoop. And finally, they broke the Malacca Strait choke point wide open. The extortion was officially over. The Chola maritime monopoly was now enforced with overwhelming, undeniable, and unchallenged power. Section 5. Legacy of the Empire. An operation of this immense magnitude doesn't just change trade routes for a few years, it fundamentally rewires the world. The aftermath of the 1025 CE strike shifted the entire geopolitical landscape. First and foremost, the Cholas secured free and open trade through the strait, deeply protecting their incredibly lucrative route to Song Dynasty China. But because they threw these geographical doors wide open and asserted such a dominant cultural and economic presence, something else massive happened. They facilitated a massive wave of cultural diffusion. By dominating the trade routes, Indian culture, religion, art, and architecture spread seamlessly all across Southeast Asia. The foundations of huge cultural shifts in regions from modern-day Indonesia all the way to Cambodia were heavily influenced by the trade network secured by this very fleet. It completely changed the dynamics of the ancient world, solidifying this strike as one of history's absolute greatest naval campaigns. And Emperor Rajendra Chola made absolutely sure that nobody would ever forget who opened those doors and commanded those seas. To commemorate this monumental victory, he built the magnificent temple at Gangaikonda Cholapuram. This wasn't just a place of quiet worship, guys. This was a permanent, monumental architectural flex. It stands today as a towering physical reminder, intricately carved in stone, of an unprecedented transoceanic victory. It was a message to the world about the sheer might, wealth, and brilliance of the Chola Empire.
Which brings us to a final lingering thought. Knowing the mind-blowing logistics required to put elephants on boats, understanding the ancient corporate power of those elite merchant guilds, picturing the sheer terror and mastery of crossing 3,000 kilometers of deep, unpredictable open ocean, and witnessing the complete systematic dismantling of a rival empire's stronghold. Was Rajendra Chola's 1025 CE expedition the greatest untold naval campaign in history? Just think about the absolute staggering scale of what we've unpacked today. I really hope this explainer sparked your curiosity and showed you just how technologically advanced, audacious, and frankly incredible ancient maritime history truly is. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.